In 9 years, you have gone from an idea that everyone thought was crazy to something that's really transformed the way people travel, been controversial, and just grown to be really, really big. You had 2 million people staying on Airbnb as of New Year's Eve. I think that was your record in your history.
Right.
So I guess my first question is, did you ever think this would be this big?
No, I mean, I remember when Joe and I were having conversations, we're like, we had the idea, and we're like, this thing's gonna be huge. One day, hundreds of people will stay in airbeds around the world. I think we always thought around the corner and always saw what people didn't see, but like one step. And where we are today might be 100 or 1,000 steps.
And originally, you actually thought that this should be a free service.
Yes.
Tell me about that.
You know, I was very inspired by the model of Craigslist, not the design of Craigslist, but the model. And it was a service for the community. And I could have been convinced to turn this into a nonprofit or a free website. I felt like, I wasn't sure if adding money would get in the way of the mission. And after then using it, I realized without money, without a reputation, it was a bit of a free-for-all. And in fact, without money, you're not really empowering the people providing, and it wasn't really an equal exchange. And so Joe and Nate, I think, helped convince me that this would be a really good business. But I would have done this if it wasn't a business. I just don't think we would have become this big. We obviously wouldn't have worked out so well.
I know, it's a lot of money.
Yes, exactly.
But it wasn't easy. In the first year, you really had very, very little traction.
No,
and there was a point where you almost thought you were going to have to throw in the towel. Tell me about that.
Well, we started working on this in January 2009. And I was looking at the stats today, like how many bookings a day did we do? And by the end of 2008, beginning of 2009, a year after working on it, we were averaging 5 bookings a day.
Wow.
And I remember hearing stories like Facebook has an idea, they launch, within 2 weeks, everyone on Harvard's campus is using it, all these other campuses want to use it. You hear like all sorts of different stories about traction, and very few people love talking about how hard it was. Everyone wants to talk about how smart they were and how easy the idea was.
Yeah.
I think maybe it was easier for other people. I also think people liked talking about how much easier it was. But for us, we spent a whole year. And a lot of people asked, why didn't you give up? And I think the thing we talked about is we thought about that first experience. And we thought, when Joe and I hosted those 3 first guests, if people experience what we could experience, this would be an idea that would spread around the world. You just have to wait a little bit longer.
And spread it did, and then it became it caught on, then it became very, very big. You've also had, obviously, your share of controversies.
Right.
I don't know if it's technically more controversies than any other startup in any other industry, but sometimes it seems that way. You're a very complex business, and you've run into all sorts of challenges, whether it's safety incidents or legal pushback or discrimination. What of those has been hardest for you?
Well, I think that the first one was by far the hardest. The first big crisis or challenge we had, which was 2011, a woman's apartment got trashed. And I came from the kind of Craig Newmark, founder of Craigslist, school of thought, which is that anyone can offer anything, and the community's an immune system. And I believe that ideologically, that I almost believed intervention was wrong, that this was for the community to sort through. And we didn't have robust 24/7 customer support. We didn't have a trust and safety team. We didn't remove very many users. And then a woman's apartment got trashed. And it was a huge wake-up call. And it told me that though our thesis was our community is an immune system, people didn't want to wait for the immune system to kick in. That we had a responsibility to prevent these bad things from happening. It completely changed our model, and now we're pretty hands-on in managing the marketplace. If you don't want to have any controversy, the best way to do that is to do nothing. And I think we should always remember that. And especially, the other thing to remember is our business is about people. We're not building routers or something in the cloud that you can't ever see. Airbnb actually exists in your neighborhood, in your streets, and sometimes in your building. It deals with some of the deepest political issues in the world, like housing, and it deals with people living together from 191 countries. There are so many political issues that we seem to kind of be related to. And the reason why is a simple reason, because our product are people.
So the legal pushback has been a constant narrative of this company, many twists and turns. In New York in particular, it's been very tough. You've made some deliberate, I don't know if you'd call them concessions or attempts to come to the table over the past couple of years, but when does this end and how does it end? What does a resolution look like for you?
If you had asked me that in June 2010, I would have said 6 months from now. I still think it's 6 months from now, maybe sooner. I do think there's a turning point. I hope it's right in front of us because there have been a lot of compromises. the mayor's office and others have made it very clear they do want to seek a resolution. We have more than 50,000 homes in New York. The vast majority of those New Yorkers, despite whatever we want to report, it's indisputable that the vast majority of those people are at a medium income level and want to and need that income to be able to fund their life. And I fundamentally believe that it's important for the city of New York and for the community to thrive, for this service to happen. Our host and our community seem to agree. We have hundreds of thousands of registered users that agree with us. And most elected officials we've talked to agree. I don't think we're any longer debating should Airbnb exist. Now, in 2010, 2011, 2012, there were debates, should Airbnb exist in New York? I don't think that exists as a debate for very many people. And so now the debate is, how should it exist? And I would answer that question by looking to the 200 cities that we have models in place, where in 200 cities we can collect and remit taxes. We have varied levels of a registration system, and we have a data sharing, which we now have in New York, where we give data every month, every quarter. And so I think we're really close to a resolution. And you know, I think that ultimately the city is going to determine what happens in Airbnb New York. But when I say the city, it's not just elected officials; it's the broader population.
Mm-hmm. Is there one thing that you would have done differently about this whole, not just in New York, but in general, about the legal pushback?
There's definitely some things I would have done differently. I would have been much more aggressive in removing some of what have been called the so-called illegal hotels. And again, a lot of our intervention kind of was antithetical to where we started. I was like, we're like Craigslist. We're like a community. It's an immune system. And over time, we would have more constraints, more constraints, more constraints. If I could have done it over again in 2011, 2012, I would have removed a lot more of the property managers that we've since removed, because I think they became a lightning rod. I think they were always a minority of our business, but they became a symbol and got overblown, and they became the wrong face of our business. So that's what I would have done differently. The only other thing I'd say, and I learned this from Belinda working with her, is being diplomatic means meeting with people and working with them. That you can't possibly have a good relationship with somebody you don't work with, you don't meet. And my first instinct when people were kind of fighting us was to retreat or to fight back. And I think that there's an old saying, it's hard to hate up close. And so if you actually meet with them, you learn. One of the things you learn is that much of what they think is wrong with you is not correct information. And much of what you think is wrong with their position isn't actually their position. And you often find a way to work together. And this is, again, what we've done in many cities. And I actually do think we're really close here in New York.
Great. Shifting topics, you last year introduced Trips, which is your first category expansion of the company. How's it going so far?
It's going incredibly well. I mean, we've had tens of thousands of people submit experiences, and there's a huge wait list because we want to kind of start small. But the satisfaction, the kind of review scores in Trips is actually significantly higher than even in homes. So we've already learned is that there was a huge amount of buzz. People like these experiences as much, actually, in fact, more than homes. And based on the limited outreach, there seems to be a greater capacity of people to want to offer an experience and offer a home. So all indicators are that I think this could be as important of an idea to our community as offering homes.
You also announced other things, restaurant reservations, events, some services, something involving flights coming sometime soon. You told me that at one point you think that Airbnb's revenue from homes is going to be less than half of the total. Is that still the goal? Or?
Yes, I think that the majority of the revenue one day will be not homes, as long as with the caveat of upsells from the homes, like amenities, extra services, things that don't exist today. Maybe to be more specific, the product that you know today as Airbnb in the future will be the majority of our minority of our revenue. That would be my prediction.
A couple weeks ago, you took a strong stand against President Trump's ban on immigration. You came right out and said you didn't agree with it and took some steps. Why was it important for you to do that?
Our mission, on New Year's Eve, we had 2 million people that were living together from 191 countries. You had people from Middle East staying with people in the United States. You had people in China staying with people in Japan. Our entire idea is predicated on the notion that you can go to any community in the world, and the moment that walls go up between communities and you can't actually have access, you can't get out, you can't get in, that is a huge opposition to our mission. The notion that you wouldn't accept somebody from a country because of who they are is just in complete violation of all the values that we believe. And I think that there's a next generation of people that are no longer just citizens of a country, but citizens of the planet. And they're going to be much more globally minded. And if you think of a child today and you think, if that child grows up, is that child growing up going to want to live in a country with walls around them? I think the history is not on your side if you believe that.
So this is a president who has been known to single out people who don't agree with what he says. Did that concern you at all? Did you think that you were taking a risk when you took that stand?
I thought I was taking a risk, but it didn't concern me.